I'm not even joking about this. If this sounds like I'm making a joke, that's not where I'm heading. I'm heading in the direction of, when I watch this, I found myself in spectator mode. Like I was watching it like entertainment. And I wanted to try to talk myself out of it as it was happening. And I'd say, no, Scott, this is not entertainment. This is the opposite of entertainment. This is just one tragedy after another. You know, one injury, one bad thing happened to somebody, a store getting looted, is really just one horrible thing after another. That's what I'm watching. But the way it was produced, the problem with being a member of the credentialed press is that the police recognize them too. And you could, when you're watching the coverage, all you would see is the police telling the credentialed press to get farther back from the action. So every time I turned on CNN, the CNN reporter was being pushed back from the police until they couldn't see anything. But I was just on Twitter last night and I came across Jack Murphy's Periscope feed. Watching Jack get into the middle of the story and then watching the professional news crews that were kept by the police so far outside of the story that it wasn't worth watching, really. There was nothing to see. Big difference. There might have been something important happening in terms of how we get the news and understand the news. Did you notice last night that the worst way to get the news was from the news? And I think there's an actual reason for that. Because a lot of the good news, not good, it wasn't good, but a lot of the, let's say, the closest to the action, most accurate reporting was coming from individuals with their phones. So if you looked at the reporting of the professional news crews, they would generally travel with enough people that you could tell it was a news crew. I assume they've got some kind of a cameraman with a proper camera. They've probably got press credentials, so everybody knows they're the press. But the problem with being a member of the credentialed press is that the police recognize them too. And you could, when you're watching the coverage, all you would see is the police telling the credentialed press to get farther back from the action. So every time I turned on CNN, the CNN reporter was being pushed back from the police until they couldn't see anything. But I was just on Twitter last night and I came across Jack Murphy's Periscope feed. So Jack Murphy, if you're not following him, you should. Just do a search for Jack Murphy. And he was in the middle of the action. And I think the difference is that he could simply look like an individual who was attending the protest. So he had a mask on and he just fit in with everybody else. He had a phone, but lots of people had phones. I assume I don't know for sure, but I think he probably had some maybe AirBuds or earbuds or something in that was his microphone slash, the way he was talking to the Periscope. But if you didn't see him live in the middle of the riots when the fires were starting, you really missed the show. So I put in my own earphones, so I could hear the action in stereo, just like I was on the street. And then I'm looking through Jack's camera, his viewfinder, and man, you were there, and you could hear his breathing and his level of, let's say, what's the right word? Level of legitimate concern for his safety as well as for his city. And there was a real drama because there was a smallish fire that got set against some construction platform stuff against a building that if the fire had continued, it would have taken out the whole building. And given the state of things, I don't know if fire crews could have even gotten there. And, there was a lot of other places the fire crews were needed. I feel like the whole block would have burned down. So you're watching, so it's at Jack Murphy Live if you're looking for his Twitter feed. So thousands of us, I think at one point there were like I don't know, 3.5 thousand of us were watching live as Jack was in the middle of the action, way closer to the action than any of the professional news crews. And you were afraid for his safety, and you were watching a building maybe go up in flames, which could have been, how many tens of millions of loss. Probably people die if you get that much fire going. And you were really there. I mean, I could not leave the feed because he put me right in the middle of the riot. And I could feel it. I could feel it viscerally. It was an incredible moment in understanding that the traditional press has some built-in limitations that I don't know if they can overcome. Maybe they'll find a way to adjust. But watching Jack get into the middle of the story, and then watching the professional news crews that were kept by the police so far outside of the story that it wasn't worth watching, really. There was nothing to see. Big difference. There might have been something important happening in terms of how we get the news and understand the news. I remember there was a quote I heard. It was a long time ago. It was years ago now. It was from Mark Cuban, and I don't know, it might have been 5 years ago or something. And he said a quote that I thought was crazy at the time, but now it's completely true. I think he was just ahead of his time. And he said that if there's a big breaking news story, he doesn't check the news. He checks Twitter, because Twitter is going to be faster and hit it from more angles, and you're going to quickly get it, and there's no commercials, and there's no, the opinion is easier to sort through. And I remember at the time I thought, well, that's not true, because I was using Twitter. I didn't have many followers, and I wasn't really being exposed to the stories the way I am now. But once you have a big account, as I do, people start tagging you in stories if they want you to boost the signal. So suddenly, this morning, I just opened up my Twitter, and I've got just the highest quality of videos and stuff. A lot of it from Andy No, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. NGO? How do you pronounce that? But anyway, Andy's got tons of videos, so I follow him, and so I'm seeing raw, on the ground footage of people being beaten, and just horrible stuff. But I didn't see very much of that on the regular news, because I don't know if the regular news is censoring that stuff because it's a little bit too rough, or they just don't have it. I don't know. So watching the difference of the quality of the news from citizens just doing their thing, world of difference. It's not even close. It's not even close, the quality of the reporting from the citizens. It's just way better than the pros. And there's a reason for it. Did you have the feeling last night, as you were watching all the televised rioting and stuff and the protesting, did you have the feeling that you were watching a televised sporting event? Or maybe the beginning of the invention of a televised sporting event? And not in a good way. Like, I'm not even joking about this. If this sounds like I'm making a joke, that's not where I'm heading. I'm heading in the direction of, when I watch this, I found myself in spectator mode. Like I was watching it like entertainment. And I wanted to try to talk myself out of it as it was happening. And I'd say, no, Scott, this is not entertainment. This is the opposite of entertainment. This is just one tragedy after another. One injury, one bad thing happened to somebody, a store getting looted, is really just one horrible thing after another. That's what I'm watching. But the way it was produced, the way the news coverage handles it, there was something about the production quality of it, something about the fact that the teams had uniforms. The police had uniforms, Antifa had uniforms, Black Lives Matter quite often had, Black Lives Matter shirts on and stuff, uniforms. So you had uniformed players on teams. There were rules of sorts. There were rules. And weirdly, people seem to follow the rules. You know, the police had their rules. Antifa has a certain set of weapons and tactics, and they stayed within that. For example, nobody in Antifa pulled a gun, right? It's a country where pretty much anybody can get a gun if they don't have a criminal record, I guess. And all of these Antifa people there, probably most of them are anti-gun, but nobody pulled a gun at Antifa. Now that suggests that they have a set of rules, which is, okay, sticks and kicking and lighting things on fire, those are within the rules, but we don't use guns. So, in a sense, they were uniformed teams. The goal of each of them seemed to be real estate, like football. In football, you're trying to control territory, and the police were trying to control territory, while the protesters were trying to control territory. For the protesters, scoring meant destroying a business or setting something on fire, or or beating senseless some victim. And I couldn't get past the fact that there's something about the fact that we don't have major televised sporting events, and then the way it was produced, it just felt like a sporting event, right? I'm not the only person who felt this, right? And again, it's possible to have complicated and conflicting thoughts in your head at the same time. It's what makes us human, right? So you can hold two thoughts that conflict with each other in your head. So you could be watching it and saying, this is the most horrible thing, I hope it stops right away, there's nothing good about it. And you can still have in your head, it's really entertaining, like in a sick, terrible way. So I was having that experience last night. I wondered if anybody else did.